I wouldn't want you to think that without you, though, there would be no judgment. There's a myth, that I am the judge. I'm the arbiter of right and wrong and better and worse. That's rubbish. I'm not anything. There's no one doing any of that. It's just naturally happening. But I don't know that dogs don't judge or trees don't judge, but I guess they don't.
Well, judging is meaningless, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So in that sense,
but not,
it's also neutral.
But not to me.
All right. Yeah.
It really isn't to me, is it?
No.
My judgments are really all that matters to me. And those who I think are superior to me, of course, their judgments matter to me. Not the idiots' judgments. I couldn't give a shit about them. Those I deem unworthy. I've already judged those whose value judgments I value and those I don't. That's what I do. There are people's opinions I value, their judgments, and there are the vast majority who I think are idiots and beneath me, and I'm contemptuous of their judgments. And they don't register, they don't matter, they don't mean anything to me. But if I admire someone, if I desire their approval, oh God, they could slay me with a word. Isn't that how it is for me? And like I say, I don't know dogs don't do that, but I just think it's naturally, that is what human beings do. So that's not me that does that, because it's not me that does anything. So there is a myth, I think, around awakening, enlightenment, liberation, that there would be this purity of non-judgment. I mean, it's a very lovely spiritual idea. Yeah. Bullshit, though.
Yeah. So it's like, are you saying like judgment happens, but for no one?
Everything happens, but for no one. Yeah. You could say that. But for no one sounds like, oh, there'll be a no one. Yeah. So even saying for no one is saying far too much. It's not for no one any more than it is for someone.
Just happens.
I hear that said, and I heard it said so much, happening for no one.
Yeah.
And I heard that. I'm only just saying how I heard that. Maybe I still, when I hear those words, sounds as though it's likely to be heard that there is a no one who now is making the judgments or hearing the words. It's almost like me is just substituted by no one. There is no substitution. You come off the field of play, football analogy, you come off the field of play, you're not replaced on the field. No one doesn't go on and take your place. Just empty where you were. And you weren't there. So it's not even noticeable. The absence isn't noticeable.
In that sense, it's not absolutely absence then, is it really? Because isn't absence in a way the opposite of presence?
Yeah. Linguistically, we can't speak of this because we only speak in opposites. No, it's not an absence. If there's no one to be absent, what would the absence of no one look like, or feel like, and how would you know? So the most common way this is always spoken of by those. The people that I can listen to who speak about this is not knowing. So you don't know absence from presence. There is no knowing of that. Whereas self is under the illusion, very much under the illusion of knowing the difference between those. I know when I'm present and I know when I'm absent. Well, this is whole. It's neither absent nor present, and both.
Both, yeah.
When I say this, I mean this. It's not that you don't know this. You just don't know about this. You can't know about this. Anything about this is just a story. So no matter how many speakers you listen to or books you read, and you think that they're closer or they're greater clarity or closer to the truth, there is no approaching this. There is no closer. I mean, I still like some spiritual phrases like about closer, you know, so spirituality says things like closer than the breath. Closer than the breath. What would that be? How closer than the breath? But you know, they're just attempts to say there is no closer or further away. So that's the devastation of the end of seeking. If it hits and there really isn't any closer, what the fuck are you going to do then? I mean, what the fuck are you going to do then is the liberation. Or rather, what the fuck am I going to do now? Do whatever you like. I'm guessing you do a lot less of what you don't like. Because you only did that because it was worthy and it would look good and it's what someone told you was a good thing to do, the right thing to do. And it may feel very rudderless, you know, really, that there isn't a rudder on the ship. You can't steer. There's no, you know, there's no big ship's wheel to turn. The boat hasn't got a rudder. In fact, there's no boat. And so you can, in that analogy, you could say the current just takes you, but really there's no current either. But without the rudder and without the steering wheel, there's no fear of taking your hands off the wheel, which I was always terrified of that, you know. I might give myself a few minutes off or a couple of hours off where I could take my hands off the wheel of my life, you know, of steering my ship, steering my life where it needs to go. But then there would be terror and I'd be desperate to get my hands back on the wheel and be in control again. No wheel, no boat, no hands. So you could say only ocean. I'm taking this analogy far too far now. It's gone mental.
Tim, aside just from the convenience of language, I mean, is there, you know, a capital I, so to speak?
Oh, like the capital S of Self, do you mean?
Yeah, I guess so.
No. No. I mean, I didn't do as much spiritual seeking as a lot of you, but I was always intrigued by, I read some Nisargadatta and I read some Ramana, and there was all this in Advaita, there's capital S self, isn't there? The self. And I always thought I was missing something because I didn't get that at all. It just seemed, so you go from, just by capitalizing, that's what I've been searching for. If I'm me, but capital me, the big, then everything will be okay. Then there'll be peace. I just thought it was poor choice. If I'm being honest, I just always felt that was poor choice of words, poor use of language. So there is no self, small s. There is only self, large. Well, I get why, and I understood. It made sense why that would be popular, because that is what I wanted. I didn't want to be little me, poor little vulnerable me, in a vast universe, powerless and insignificant. I could become the universe, God. So as I understand it, I've probably got it completely wrong. The whole notion of this capitalized self is that I am God. Well, of course I wanted to be God. Who doesn't? Every self wants to be God. Every self is a little God. That's what I am. Loving it when I feel powerful. Terrified when I don't, when life shows me my utter insignificance and powerlessness, which life does to selves all the time. It's called trauma. Self is traumatized when life shows it. I've done everything within my power to keep safe. Bang. Well, I didn't see that coming. And I thought I'd planned for all eventualities. And I longed to be all-powerful, all-knowing, all the God words, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipotent, and God.
Well, would you say that's the same as the concept of universal consciousness and universal awareness?
I don't know, but yeah, it's kind of, it's just God with greater abstraction, it seems to me. That's how it always feels. I think it's just the need that self has, that there has to be some source. This can't be causeless. This can't be rootless. It can't be groundless. There has to be a ground of being, pure consciousness, absolute awareness, pure being, pure anything. I mean, self loves the idea of purity because I feel impure. I know I am. Self doesn't doubt it, but I long not to be. I don't want, don't want to get too psychological about it, but all the stuff that I feel I need to hide from all the other selves, lest they think I'm some kind of monster. Pretty certain that everyone else is doing the same. And so I long for this idea of purity. And it's kind of a beautiful idea. Most of human thinking is beautiful. I mean, it's incredible. But I mean, it's an idea, isn't it? God's an idea. Consciousness is an idea. Awareness is an idea. And I'm not against any of them as ideas, but when anyone makes that the truth, then it's fundamentalism. And self is self-righteous in its knowledge of the truth, in fundamentalism in all forms. And there's no love in that. I just wouldn't wish it for anyone. I wouldn't wish for anyone to know the truth. I'd wish for everyone to not doubt that the truth is unknowable. Because that feels like love.
Once more. Once more.
What did I say? You know, but most people would wish, so if you've got a fundamentalist belief in the truth, I don't mind if it's religious, political, it doesn't matter. Non-dual, spirit, it doesn't matter. Anyone who thinks, you know they're all arseholes, aren't they? Because all they're doing is going around telling everyone how they've got it wrong. It's utterly, it's this whole notion of truth or reality. I know what's real. I know the truth about reality. It's awful. Really. In relationships with other human beings. That's just my opinion. But I really think it is. So, and I still have lots of people tell me, well, it's okay for you because you know the truth. I mean, you've had this realization of the absolute. I can't emphasize enough. That's not where the motivation to speak about this doesn't come from any of that at all. The motivation to speak about this is to tell anyone who would listen that I know you want to know. I know you want to know. You can't know. There is no, and also not that the knowledge of the absolute is impossible, because there isn't any absolute knowledge. All knowledge is just relative. And so then knowledge is liberated too. It's wonderful because knowledge is just what it is. Relative knowledge. And then you can really admire those who have knowledge about subjects you're interested in, and life becomes more interesting, not less. This isn't nihilistic in that sense at all. But you won't be interested in anyone who wants to tell you that they've found the truth. You might politely say, oh, that's interesting. And from that moment, not hear another word they say. Which there's great pleasure in that, I have to say. I quite enjoy that. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Done. I'm not hearing anything else they've got to say. Because they're just going to be telling me. So the motivation to speak about this is that, to tell anyone who would listen, is that if you could call off the search. You can't. But if you could, because I mean, if I thought there was a way to hear, if there was a path, then I would teach it. I definitely would. I've been a teacher all my life. I can teach. You know, if I know where I've got to get to. So I would be teaching you the way. If I thought there was a way. If there was a way. But there's no way to hear, is there? There's no path. That's why you can describe life as whole and complete, because there aren't any paths leading to it and there aren't any paths leading away.
It's funny, it sounds good and it's totally scary.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
There's no place for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it sounds terrifying for me because I need to know where I stand. I need ground to stand on, to know my place.
Yeah.
Because I'm a point. Everything is referenced from the point where I am. And there is no point. I like the word pointless because it points to the fact that there isn't a reason, there is no reason for anything, no cause and effect. So pointless in the sense of this doesn't have a reason for being, which can sound very appealing to me, but that's quite scary. But nowhere near as scary as pointless in the sense of there is nowhere to be, there is no place. And the only reference point I have to know where I am, to know who I am, is the point from which this is seen. Being the observer, there's a point. I am the point. So most spirituality goes inside. So from the still point, we'll go into the still point, we'll go inside and then we'll look inside. Well, if there is no point, I mean, there's no inside. There's only space. There's only emptiness. So all points are, you could say illusory, but they're not. They're relatively real, so. The relative still appears relative, so there's a point there and there's a point here. But what I'm referring to is the point of life from which life is being lived. That's me. That's I. That's illusory. There is no point from which this is being seen. There isn't an observer, a watcher, a seer, a witness. Pointless, centerless. Yeah, that's what I'm trying. Yeah, the pointless as in lovely book, one of the first books I got, Life, I think it's called Life Without a Center by Jeff Foster. And really life without a center, just trying to convey that, it's just that there isn't the inside and the outside are not two. It's just that you can't find a point. You can't go inside to find. I don't know if you've ever looked for yourself. I'm guessing you must have done a lot of that. They call it self-inquiry. I don't know what you found.
Nothing.
But I mean, I did self-inquiry for at least 10 minutes. After the first 30 seconds, it was obvious there was nothing to find. But I persevered and I stuck with it, maybe 6-7 minutes. Stuck with it. Still found nothing. Well, I was pretty sure there's nothing to find. That was the end of that. And then I read, or I meet people and they go, I've been doing self-inquiry for 37 years. I like slightly bemused. Well, didn't you know, after the first time you sat down, you read about it and or you were taught it and you practiced it and you found nothing, didn't you? Straight away, you know, within minutes you found nothing, didn't you? And they went, yeah. So why did you carry on? Well, I was looking for, no, but this is it. This is the whole search. This is the ludicrous nature of the search. So you found nothing. Yeah, I found nothing. So you thought you'd do it again tomorrow. What did you find? I found nothing again. So you thought it was a good idea to do that for 37 years. And what did you find? Nothing.
But isn't that also the character of me?
That's hilarious, though. I mean, I'm mocking it, but I mean, it's not. It's tragic, but it's so obvious because, of course, nothing isn't an answer. So what do you have to do? You keep pursuing because I haven't found any. I haven't found what I'm looking for, which is an answer that doesn't exist. It's not fucking rocket science or neuroscience, is it? I can't deal with that shit. But nothing is very straightforward. Too simple. Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah. This is too simple. So you find nothing. Well, that can't be it, can it? It can't be that there's nothing to find. There's no satisfaction in it. There is no satisfaction in nothing. It's nothing. So in finding nothing, I haven't found the something, the absolute something. What if this is absolutely nothing? You won't find nothing. There's nothing to be found. What a joke.
It's also a common sentence is, there's nowhere to hide. And there's no one who can hide, and there's no place to hide.
Ooh, yeah.
But it's just, you know what I'm talking about when I say that you can't hide, then it's just, we both have an understanding, but right now I see it just different, because then there can be this searching in this you can't hide. Okay, then I have to practice whatever and so on, but there's no one who can hide, and there's no place to hide. It's much more free.
It's incredibly easy. I mean, I talk about there's an ease to life that there never was for me. Even when life was good for me, in my story of my life, when things were going my way, even then there was hiding. I was still very afraid. There was great fear that, well, it's all going to end soon. You know, it's going well. I know I'm terrified of going to fucking, this can't last. This can't last. And also, I was always afraid of people might see, because I'm doing a really good job of convincing everyone that I'm right on the game, that I'm actually superb at what I do, that I'm a really nice guy. And I'm still hiding quite a lot of shit when things are going well. In fact, maybe when things are really shit, you know, and I'm a sobbing fucking mess on the floor, there's a lot less hiding in that. But I'm terrified of being that. So I have to hide from that and my fear of being that. But yeah, there's no... yeah, hiding is suffering. I always describe my life as I had two basic strategies: hiding and running. Running was when it was good. Hiding was when it was bad. For me. Every self is bipolar to a degree, doing those two strategies. You know, running would be, you know, doing everything I can to be successful at work and in my relationship, and seems to be going kind of to plan. Even when there's hiccups, look how good I am, I can overcome those. I'm feeling powerful and life's on track. And then the hiding is when your train falls off the track. Then you try and get back on track. Great fear of failure. I had a massive fear of failure. Always feeling a failure, even in success, because the fear of failure was virtually never away. So the other reason I might say love is because there is no failure. There are no successful ones. Disappointing to lose the admiration and hero worship that I had for human beings that I thought were where I would like to be, I would like to emulate. They all fall. So it's like raising up the shit from, you know, the human beings you've looked down to. They're raised up and all the heroes fall into the dirt and everyone's just sitting on the floor. That feels like love. That there aren't any special ones or unspecial ones. If there's no specialness, everything, everyone, every human being, the whole of appearance is absolutely equal. It's all there is. Just incredible equality. And that's unconditional. So you might call it love, you might not.
Could you also say that then in that case everything is special without an opposite?
It's all paradoxical in the sense of if nothing is special, then everything is special. Yeah, because there's not in relation, and yet the relationships are still apparent. You can still talk about relationship. I mean, you can still do comparison, and there's still judgment. Nothing is lost when everything is lost. So it's not like you'd lose, because it sounds, well, it's all right for you, you never judge, you're not comparing, you see everything as every human being you love equally. That's not the love I'm talking about. I'm talking about regardless, in spite of, despite all of what we call normal human thoughts.
In spite of the relative.
Yeah. The relative isn't going anywhere. It's human nature. It's just that the relative is just relative rather than absolutely. So it's not absolutely real. It's relatively real. That's it. I mean, again, too simple. What am I speaking about? No. Everyone says, well, how is life? Well, it's just the fucking same. You know, that's not what you've been looking for. You've been seeking something spectacular. Well, I'm only speaking for myself. I was seeking some radical shift, that fucking word, where the world would appear radically different, would feel radically different. So I end up saying things like, when someone asks me, so how is it different? I'll say it's not different at all. But it's completely different. Shit like that I come out with. And I think, fucking hell, what on earth does that mean? Exactly the same, completely different. There you go. That's all you're going to get. But of course, life is never the same. This isn't right. There is nothing. There's nothing new in this. Because it's not about knowing. It's not about understanding. Whatever you're waiting for to happen in order for this to be seen, just can't happen. There isn't anything that is going to happen. The only thing that's happening is happening, and even that's not happening. You know, you won't find what's happening. So this is this. The message is there's only what's happening. So you're looking for what's happening. You can't find what's happening because it's happening. If you find what's happening, it's what's happened. You fucking haven't found it. Hilarious.
When you post a video on YouTube, you will watch it?
Of course. Somebody said the other day, so who do you still watch then? And I went, yeah, there's a few people I like. Mainly I just watch myself. It's the only one who makes any sense. Now the thing is, I'm not joking, by the way. That is true. My brother caught me the other day. It's like worse than being caught masturbating by your brother, which is bad. That's humiliating, but not as humiliating as your brother coming in and he goes, "What are you watching?" He goes, "It's fucking you." And he said, he went, "So much for death of ego." I went, "He's good though. He's good. He's good. He talks a lot of sense." Yeah. And I was genuinely embarrassed. It was funny. I was laughing at it. Yeah, that's pretty embarrassing. And now I've confessed it to the world. That's some confession. But then, I was going to say something about that. What was it? Oh yeah, but so there are speakers you like, and you think some people are speaking again closer to the truth, greater clarity. Now, all that means is this is quite a revelation. It's closer to your thoughts, opinions, feelings. They're not yours, but that's all it means. So all the truth means, this is quite a revelation. It means closer to what you've called yourself, to yours. That's all it ever means. Isn't that funny? So what every human being, whatever they're attracted to, as that resonates, that's a popular word, and all that resonance is just same as I would say. That's all it means. Isn't that hilarious? I mean, that's how significant anyone's words are. The only significance they have is how close are they to what I would say. Nothing else. That's the whole truth. What a joke. I mean, I mean, there's such a lightness to that. It's wonderful. I really like him. Yeah, sounds like you. That's why. That's all it means. He's really good. Yeah, just like you. You think you're good, or you want to be, and the resonance is very close to exactly what I've thought. Even if you've never thought it, someone else says it, and it's what you wanted to think or you would have liked, and the attraction is like me, funny. And that is then taken to be some absolute. Just because I like it. It's like making your guru because they like the same.
They're nice to
Does-
dogs and
They
children.
like the same coffee as you. It's as significant as that. Isn't that funny? And it all revolves around this myth of there must be the truth, the reality, not any old reality. Because I know you're not interested in that. You want the absolute reality. And the absolute reality is the tiny little relative reality that you called yourself. That's it. It's wonderful. It's hugely liberating.
I think I have to ask this one. There's this notion or saying that the drop returns to the ocean.
Right.
And I think I've had this idea that when it returns to the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
for example, you and Tony Parsons would kind of be the same.
Yeah.
And you could basically wake up in Tony Parsons and he could wake up in you because it would be the same.
What if that's already happened? No.
It's yeah, of course not, but
I see what you mean.
yeah, good.
Yeah. If all the drops are all mixed,
All the drops
are all mixed up in the ocean. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's not that the drop returns to the ocean. There is no return. There's just no drop.
Tell me something.
Well, there aren't any drops. There's just the ocean. In that analogy, the illusion is the drops. Just the ocean.
Yeah.
Oceans. It's a very lovely romantic notion, analogy, but ocean's not that good because an ocean has there's depth to the ocean, and oceans have shores. Space is a better analogy with the planets. Really. At least, imagination can sort of get a taste of the boundlessness of space, that space doesn't end. Because that will stop thinking, won't it? You did that as a kid when I talked about it the other day, staring up at the space between the stars, the dots of existence, and then the emptiness. It's a bit better analogy than the ocean, but of course it's only storytelling. But I mean, you've got both stories there. You've got the story of where you might go to as the drop, you might return to the ocean, and you've got the story before of when you were born and when you received a face. You were no face before, you were the ocean. And then you became a drop and you received a face, and then you returned to the ocean. None of that. None of it. Apart from stories about. It's all romanticism. Just stories of existing. So both, the illusion is both of being separate and returning to wholeness. There's no more, that's a story of separation. There is no return to wholeness. If there's only wholeness, there's no return, there's no drop to return to the ocean. And there was never a no face to gain a face and then return to no face again. Just some romantic stories of, so that I then exist. This is truly dreadful for the one who exists. I don't pretend it's romantic. You can't do anything but that. But it's not. All stories, dreadful stories and romantic stories, hopeful stories and horror stories, they're all stories, they lose all their power when they're just stories. None more true or less true than others. There aren't any true stories. And the search is for the true story. Stories about this. All of this. Stories about this. No exclusion. There isn't any outside or inside. There's nothing inside this. There's nothing outside this. That's the end of the search. If there really isn't anything inside or anything outside, what could be found? That's the end. That's always beginning. You don't find the end. You don't find the beginning. And there's nothing in the middle. What is there left to look for then? That's what I'm speaking of. Dreadful. You've got nothing to do. That is the piece and that doesn't make sense. Of course there's things to do. The bills need paying and you haven't done the washing up. Things to do, doing. Nothing needs to be done. That's it. What needs to be done? Nothing needs to be done. Doing or not doing, absolutely equal. Equally, nothing better than anything else. And we are very powerfully conditioned, or at least I was, that doing was far superior to not doing. I mean, in my education, I was taught it's the Protestant work ethic, as though Catholics were lazy, I always thought. Because I was taught it's the Protestant work ethic, not like those lazy fucking Catholics. I thought that as a kid. Hold on. Is it only the Protestants that work hard? But yeah, this work ethic, that doing is righteous. And the sin of lethargy, the sin of lacking motivation, you probably had it as much as me. We were very heavily conditioned that not doing, or seemingly what appears not doing, of course not doing is no less doing than what's seen to be doing. There isn't really that distinction at all. So what I'm speaking of is liberation for laziness. And of course, as I longed for rest, of course there can be rest in doing. Again, there's no less rest in doing than there is in sitting on your lazy ass, but there's great peace in that. There's nothing to be done. Doing or not doing, absolutely equal, which they never were for me. I would get a panic every Sunday, couldn't enjoy my rest, my day of rest, worried sick about all the things that I hadn't done that needed to be done over the weekend, ready for Monday. That sick Sunday feeling. I mean, it doesn't happen very often now, but I do remember when that, basically when I didn't have a job and I didn't have that, dread, real nausea, sick to the pit of my stomach with fear of not having done what needed to be done. So nothing needs to be done. Don't expect anyone to agree with you on this, by the way. No one agrees with me on this. But lovely. Rest in peace. That is the peace that passes all understanding, doing or not doing. Whatever. No longer what anyone else says about, the righteousness of work. Or of being motivated, actually. This lack of motivation, just a terrible sin. Yes. Well, you'll go to hell for that, for sure. Well, looks like heaven. How funny is that? Feels far more heavenly than that dreadful work ethic. So the ideas of ethics and morals and right and wrong, they remain, but they're not. They've lost all their energy. I'm going to keep using that word now. They've lost all their juice, because that was only me and my fear of judgment, whether it was God's or my mother's. Really, is there any difference? My teachers, my parents, my friends, my lovers, and most of all, myself. That's the judgment I fear most.
Is innocence just kind of believing thoughts?
Well, that's innocent. What I would say about innocence, I could say, it's not true, but I could say that everything is innocent without guilt. But of course, then there's no innocence without guilt. So actually saying everything is innocent, there's only innocence, that's not true. But in the sense of there's no guilt, then of course it's true. Well, guilt and innocence only really apply to me and you. don't apply to trees. We don't say that's a guilty rock. So in that sense, you could say there's only innocence, but it doesn't apply really without the sense of there could be guilt. The absence of guilt isn't really innocence, but in language it is. So it's true, and it's not true that everything is innocent. So it may be obvious that human beings are no different to the rocks and the trees, or the dogs and the birds. Or the worms and the fish. And that the absence of guilt may have a sense of innocence about it. It's strictly not true. It's utterly neutral. And innocence sounds like something positive. But it's actually empty, it's neutral, it's not something positive. There is no positive and negative unless you say so, or someone else says so. The trees aren't telling you that.
Positive tree.
The tree's not positive or negative, is it? Or innocent or guilty.
Can I ask you a dark question? It is really dark.
Sure.
Now we are with innocence. It seems like with the war in Ukraine and with the American border, a lot of children are disappearing, like innocent children. And it seems like there's a certain circles that are an abuse of children.
Mm-hmm.
They are killing the children. It is dark, this one.
Mm-hmm.
And they are even killing other children in front of children, so they get so scared before they get killed themselves. And
Right.
they take the blood out and drink it. There's something called adrenochrome that some people get a high from. What the fuck is that? What's going on here?
I know. That's why you shouldn't say innocence, probably.
Yeah, but I mean, what is this? How can people go that dark?
Well, how?
Yeah,
I don't have any answers to how.
No.
This doesn't provide any answers to any of those questions. No. There aren't any solutions. This is not an answer. No. If you're looking for answers to questions, then you need to go to people who know or say they know some answers. Yeah. Right. This is the absence of any answers. Or any answers that appear are equally empty. This doesn't need any solution, even to what we would say are the darkest deeds. That's kind of why I said you could say that everything is innocent, but then saying those sort of actions are innocent is so abhorrent that innocence isn't the right word. But it is simply as it is. This is not making things right. This is not solving anything that you feel is wrong or disgusting or abhorrent and repulsive and what you might judge as evil. So that's what I would say about innocence, is innocence isn't the right word. But there's no one to blame, because usually the only solution we can come up with is whose fault is it? Who's to blame? And then we can set about punishing them. And so that what we find unbearable about life becomes a little bit more bearable because I'm doing something about it. Even thinking about it and what might be done. Even understanding it is an attempt to solve it. If I understand it, then we're closer to a solution. So this is the suggestion is that there isn't anything to be solved. And that doesn't appeal to self at all. No, there's nothing appealing about this for the one who wants answers to life's problems.
But the problems are only for me, or what would you say?
I wouldn't say that, no. No, because then there's the offer of, without me there would be no problems. And that's a kind of a solution. Problems. Life seems to present problems. With or without the sense that they're my problems, life can seem problematic. Which really means a problem only means I don't like it and I wish it was another way. That's the problem, isn't it? So you would wish that wasn't like that.
Yes.
Yeah, well it is.
Yes.
That's all. Too simple, again. And it doesn't mean to say that there's anything right or wrong about trying to make it better. Again, that's as it is. Yeah, so, I mean, it's not a liberation that self would ever want, but liberation for sorrow which is gratitude as well. There's sorrow in gratitude. Because there can be sorrow that I've not allowed the gratitude. I've been ungrateful. And then gratitude just appears and it's wonderful. But there is sorrow in that, how have I not been, how could I have not been grateful always, but most of the time I'm questioning. Self is always saying, well, it's not quite as it could be. How can I be grateful for things that aren't as they should be? And there can be like a constant gratitude, so you wouldn't even call it gratitude when everything is just as it is, and there's no doubt, because the doubt is the lack of gratitude. The doubt is that it could be other. Life could be other than it is, even for the horrors. And the suffering is, of course, the constant striving to make it right. Not just for myself, but for all the other selves, for everyone. And I'm not a fan of happiness because this sense of happiness is right and sadness is wrong makes most of life wrong. So there are people who speak about non-duality as though it's in some way about happiness. I couldn't disagree more. No, you've actually dismissed most of life right there. You've made most of life wrong. Happiness spontaneously appears like sorrow and grief, boredom, anger, resentment, jealousy, envy. The whole spiritual charade that, okay, if you get it, or if it's got, even if there's a suggestion you couldn't get it, but it could be got, is the sense of that it's a state, a permanent state, any kind of permanency. There is no permanency. This is the annihilation of all ideas of continuation, of any permanent, not even permanency, continuation. So even, the idea or the sense that you could keep something away, a state, a feeling, a sense, for a length of time. It's nonsense. Everything just appears and disappears. Actually, nothing remains. So, I've been happy all day. It's not true. You know it's not true already. Everyone knows this. Happiness is not something that continues. So I've been sad all day. Bullshit. You haven't. You've been sad when there's a thought that I'm sad. When there's sadness without the thought of I'm sad, you really couldn't call it sadness. It's just how it is. But there is, the continuation is often the desire for the happiness. I feel joy, I feel ecstatic, I feel I feel free, and the whole illusion is the sense is, how can I keep this? So the sense of keeping what you want and losing what you say you don't want, it's all nonsense. It's just not how life is. I remember what it was like to feel depressed, but I know for sure when I was suffering from depression, diagnosed with medication and therapy, and everyone thinking I've got a mental illness, I wasn't depressed all the time. No, that's not how it is. That's not how life is. There is no all the time. It's like when someone asks you, how are you? You never know how you are until someone asks you, how are you? And then there's thinking, okay, so how am I? And then you make some shit up. And you tell them, and then you feel compelled. And how are you? They've had time, they've already got their answer. They have. But the whole, there aren't many human beings who are aware or have the sense of, I have to really think how I am. Because the natural state is, there is no you and how you are. It's nothing, it's nothing spectacular. It's nothing. It's not extraordinary, but the whole how am I is a story that you tell it to yourself in thought, and then, but most of the time when someone asks you, and usually you lie as well, of course. I'm fine. You don't tell them your darkest thoughts. But the truth is, you don't know how you are because you're not. There you go. What more liberation would you want? But it's so habitual. You don't need anyone to ask you. You ask yourself, I'm waking in the morning, so how am I? So when there's sadness, you're not sad. There's only sadness. When you feel joy, or when there's joy, it's not your joy. You don't feel joy. You're not happy. There's happiness. When there's anxiety, it's not your anxiety. There's anxious thoughts, anxious feeling. And even anxious is nonsense. There's just feelings in the body. There's a little nausea, not in the pit of my stomach. When there's fear, there's just fear. And then there's the whole story of why am I afraid? What am I afraid of? How can I sort this? What do I need to do? And of course, worst of all, what have I done wrong? What error have I made in order for this to be as it is? You have not made any error. There are no errors that anyone makes. So that's liberating, but it's not as liberating as you can't get it right. So not being able to make any mistakes might sound very attractive, but it's not attractive to me because I can only envisage then I'll be getting it right all the time, which is just exactly the same as error, just flipped over. It's the same. There's no peace in getting it right. But because self is in this dualistic idea of there is right and wrong, there is correct and incorrect, there is good and there is evil. So there are things that need, there are atrocious events that need sorting out. And what is I can make it my job to do that or not. But just on the everyday scale, it's no different. My girlfriend says she doesn't like it when I do that. It upsets her. So it upsets her, it upsets me, because what upsets me means I'm afraid. I'm afraid she won't like me. I'm afraid it'll end the relationship if I do the wrong thing. So I have to be vigilant, and all the stories where everything actually just spontaneously appears. For no time. For no duration. I mean, I can tell the story of I've been here for a weekend. I haven't, have I? And you haven't. No, really. I mean, really. If anything is real, really, no. Just stories. And we need, every self needs the other selves to confirm their story as real and true. Otherwise, that is the only reality that the story has. And of course, I can't have it that my life is just a story made up. Because then I really do feel I'm falling. And it's very common for, if you get a little glimpse or there's a taste of the non-existence of time, then it really feels like falling. If the past loses its solidity. Not so bad with the future. Even self can at least entertain the idea that there isn't a future. You know, tomorrow never comes. My grandmother was always telling me that when I said, I'll do it tomorrow. Even my grandmother had a sense of there really wasn't tomorrow. But yesterday, that has to be real for me. A moment ago, you know, when I started speaking about this, that has to be real. Otherwise, where am I? I don't know where I am. If I don't know where I am, I don't know where I'm located. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I am. I don't know what is and what isn't. I don't know the difference. Now, nobody knows the difference, but it's such a power. That's the, you know, the cliche is the illusion. That's the conviction in existence. And so it can feel terrifying, and it can feel devastating. It can feel, and there can be great grief because it is a loss of everything. I mean, you lose your whole life. Do you want to lose your whole life? No. Of course not. I mean, that's the dreadful news, and the dreadful news is the wonderful news. The wonderful news is there's no life to lose. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, that's the whole story. That there is seemingly everything to lose, but it was never yours to lose. And so there is nothing to lose. And that's liberation. If it means anything, it means nothing to lose. Because there is nothing to be lost. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's laughable.
So all the things I hold on to are just my stories and thoughts and ideas about.
The thing about the stories aren't false. They're true as stories. So without the stories, there would be nothing. Or you wouldn't, I can't say there'd be nothing. There'd be everything, but there wouldn't be anything to say about everything. Because everything that's said about everything is a story about everything. And how the separate things in everything relate to each other and fall in love with each other and fight with each other. So when stories are only stories, they're liberated too. So, I mean, how wonderful for your story to be liberated from the one whose story it belongs to. Because that's what makes it so painful. All the suffering is the story, and the suffering isn't the story. It's my story, and what it means, what it's saying, what it says about me. Well, it's not saying anything about you. It's not saying anything about anything. So if you told me your life story, it really wouldn't, because it's not my story, it wouldn't be saying anything about me, would it?
About you?
Yeah,
No.
your story. You tell me your story. It wouldn't be saying anything about me. But that's not how it would feel for you telling me your story. Everything would have huge weight and power and significance and gravitas, because it's your whole world. It's just a story. And don't kid yourself, you want that. Self loves its story being. Self loves being the center of the universe, the sun, shining its light, being the center, looking out. The story doesn't matter whether your story is happy or sad or successful or failure. It doesn't matter to me. I will take any of it as long as it matters, as long as I've got significance, as long as it's about me. So nothing. It was never about you. It's never about you. Isn't that great? Dreadful. Dreadfully wonderful. Say that again.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the question was, but like judgment, like if you judge other people, is that all just coming out of fear of? Because then you think you know who they are in relation to you. You feel better.
Well, it could be, but judgment, I wouldn't want you to think that, they're your judgments. Human beings are naturally judgmental. You're not going to become a saint But if I was trying to say a difference, judgments just don't mean anything if they're not mine. I mean, judgments are significant and important because they're mine, like everything else. But yeah, I guess there is even a possibility that if they're not your judgments, then there's more judgments. You might even become less of a saint. How about that? Because judgment really is just preference. In a raw way, a judgment is a preference. Liking and disliking. You could say that's accurate. Liking and disliking is completely natural. I'd relate it to animals again. Dogs like some dogs. Oh, there's a dog and it really likes some people, and then a dog will meet another dog or a human being, and for no apparent reason, the dog doesn't need to know why. I don't fucking like you. Why is it growling at me? I haven't done anything. Well, no, you don't need to have done anything. Animals have natural dislikes. The whole illusion is that you could work out why. The dog isn't working out, it just doesn't like you. piss off. Don't touch me or I'm going to bite you. Oh, I mean, we're far more like dogs than self ever wants to let on. You meet a human being and there's a powerful dislike. And then self comes and goes, well, that's not reasonable. Be reasonable. Be reasonable. You've got no cause to feel. You're saying you don't want to go near them. You really dislike them. Why? Why? Well, no reason.
And it doesn't matter.
Not at all, does it? But it does to me, because I'm a rational self who likes to know why I do what I do. That's the whole illusion, is I need to know, and I do know a lot of the time, apart from when I don't know, and then I get really quite afraid because I don't know what's going on with myself. And then I get afraid. I don't know what's going on. Well, no, you never know what's going on. How about that? No one knows what's going on. There is no knowing what's going on. In fact, there's nothing going on. That wasn't anything. I went off track there. What did you say again?
Something about judgment. It was
Judgment, yeah. Well, we're as judgmental as dogs are. There you go. Dogs are just not judging the judging,
right.
which isn't a judgment, it's just a natural preference. I mean, we don't make a big deal of, I like Gorgonzola, but I don't like Camembert. I mean, we're not making a big deal of that kind of judgment, but it's the same. It's exactly, we just go, oh no, why don't you? Oh, I just naturally, it's just a preference.
It's like,
I like Kronenberg lager, but I don't like that black lager. Then, of course, if someone asks you why, then you then have to make something up. And you think, it's probably, and it is always, it's probably because it's got that, and it's probably because of that. But is that required for the disliking or the liking? Not at all. It's all in addition to. It's actually justifying. Self is in a constant state of justifying its actions, its feelings, its beliefs, because they belong to me, I need to be. And because that's a self-protection as well, because if anyone asks me, I need to be prepared why I did that, why I feel that. I mean, shit is hard work being me, isn't it? It's constant.
Because we're afraid of the other's judgments.
Absolutely. So my judgments, I need to have a really good backup story to justify. And then, of course, I'm naturally drawn to others who will collude with me, with my story, and back my story up. In any sphere, politically, spiritually, morally, behaviorally.
I wanted to paint this picture that I'm a kind, compassion, and all these different things, man.
Yeah.
I'm not this and this.
Yeah. Well, that you could say that self is that mask, and self's very afraid of of people seeing beneath the mask, the facade. Of course, there isn't a facade. The whole idea of a facade is a facade. There's no one wearing a mask. You take the mask off, and there's no face. Really.
Yeah.
So no head,
Pardon?
or no head either.
No head. Nobody.
It's a little bit, you have told this before, that you like to be with the pessimistic and in a way depressive people, and I have the same because it's without a mask, more without a mask.
Yeah,
I
usually.
relax more when I'm not in this. Everything is just going.
Well, what seems to happen with depression is the effort to keep up that is just becomes too great, and the choicelessness of letting that mask drop is so obvious in depression.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't choose to be depressed. It's against all your wishes or all self-desires to keep it all together. You know, you've been spinning all the plates and one crashes and you start running faster because the others are slowing down as well. You just run faster and faster. But then no matter how fast you run, the plates are falling regardless. And so, of course, there is a sense of when you're with someone who's, I mean, not everyone, because in depression, some selves actually completely withdraw, so there's no openness. But
Yeah, but not depression, but when it's more, you can say neutral, or with people who can talk about
yeah,
so-called dark side,
Mhm.
and I'm also hate my children, I hate, in a way. Like
Oh, yeah.
This. Yeah.
well, it feels great, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does.
Well, it's really painful being around people who are happy all the time, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because you never believe them.
No. No.
It can feel excruciating. You can't wait to, oh, can't I just go away and just be miserable for a while? Let me. Yeah.
So I watched American Psycho a couple of years ago, and the thing struck me. It's in the intro, and I just found it on my phone. He says something I think it's quite interesting. So bear with me. He says there's an idea of a Patrick Bateman, who's the main character, some kind of abstraction, but there is no real me, only an entity, something illusory. And though I can hide my cold gaze, and you can shake my hand and feel flesh gripping yours, and maybe you can even sense our lifestyles are probably comparable, I simply am not there. And I think it's interesting because this
Are
is
you
like,
saying I'm a psycho?
exactly? No, but that's the
I thought you were.
yeah. Because
You wouldn't be the first.
that's probably that. If like a general view on if there's no one there, then there's evil somehow.
Yes,
there
of
has to be
course.
someone in order for there to be good and morality.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's
It's kind of true. It's kind of true.
What's that?
It's kind of true.
It's kind of true.
Yeah, because of course morality in the absolute sense of it,
definitely,
it just becomes
So,
a story.
yeah.
This isn't about, I mean, there is no benefit for you in becoming a better human being, which if you think that's what you've been trying to do, you could say that's my quest, isn't it? However, every self has their own unique idea and fantasy of what my perfect self would be like.
So there could be a more true self.
No. No, that would be the fantasy. No, that would be the fantasy.
True expression.
No.
Okay.
No, because there's nothing more true than anything else. This is the end of all concepts of truth just collapse. Because truth only exists in false. You know, truth as an idea is because the false goes, And then there's the truth revealed. Well, there is only the truth, including everything that you would call false. That's equally true. So in that sense, there is no truth. If there's nothing false, there's nothing true.
It's just you're talking about, it gets complicated, but like there's no need to be a better person, or you said something like that.
Well, what seems to die is the motivation to become. All becoming is just redundant. It doesn't really die because it never was there, but but that whole sense of that you might fulfill whatever imagination has created as your ideal self, this idea of perfection. So perfection dies as an idea. Even the approaching, even working towards perfection completely is annihilated. And so then you could say, and I've heard speakers say that then this is perfect. Everything is perfectly as it is. But of course, that's really misleading, because imperfection, relatively, is just as obvious as before. But it's perfectly imperfect. I think the whole notion of perfection, because I've heard quite a few people romanticize about this as perfection. Everything is perfect. Without you, everything would be perfect. Bullshit. Everything will be as it is. Now, whether that's seen as perfection or imperfect, it's neither here nor there. It's just as it is. And there's nothing you could do to see more perfection. That's the illusion, that you could move towards a realization of everything is already perfect, which I hear quite a lot. There's no sense of that. But it's self and self's idealism. This idea that there is an ideal. Well, idealism is annihilated. There's only this. Now, this isn't ideal or not ideal. It's as it is. If it's seen as ideal, it's seen as ideal. That's as it is. So all the ideas, the idealism just collapses, you could say. And you won't, if someone says things aren't ideal, well, they're not ideal. That's not untrue. And someone says, well, everything's perfect. Well, oh, that's nice.
So there's no more like fear there in like, let's say, social gatherings, social situations.
Well, I'm not the best character to ask that. I never had great social anxiety. But I know plenty of people who have that. It wouldn't surprise me if there'd be less social anxiety. Because social anxiety is self-consciousness. Mostly. This whole illusion that others can see me is powerful. And there is great liberation in the obvious fact that no one can see you. No one's ever seen you. There's no possibility of being seen. You might cry about that, if you've longed to be seen. To be known. Self has a longing in its isolation to be known by another, so that the aloneness isn't so complete. But you can't be seen. There's nothing to see. No one's ever known you, including yourself. It can just be very obvious. If you can't see yourself, then of course, how would on earth another see you? Or you see another? There really aren't any others without me. So self is very afraid. This self, myself was very afraid of being alone. Hence I was afraid of the dark. That was aloneness. And I would do anything to avoid that fear of being alone. Well, of course, being is alone. There is being alone. It's just not mine. It's not that I am alone. The aloneness is much more. The aloneness is much worse than I ever feared.
Say again?
The aloneness is much worse than I ever feared. This is completely, utterly, wholly, absolutely alone. Now that sounds dreadful, and then I just flip it over and say there's only oneness, and you go, ah.
So alone can be like complete terror.
Well, it can feel terrifying for me. Now, there are, self has lots of flavors, and there are plenty of selves who enjoy the aloneness and fear the relationship, fear others. And I guess all selves have a combination, there's fear of both. So you crave connection and you long for the peace of aloneness. I think every self has, but it seems that some human beings naturally prefer one than the other. So introverts prefer aloneness. And too much is too painful. Too many is too painful. And then extroverts really fear the aloneness profoundly, which is very hard for introverts to understand as well, Those human beings who prefer being alone can be a complete mystery to an extrovert who always wants connection and it constantly is afraid of this undoubted aloneness. Now, I don't think there are any human beings who don't know what aloneness I'm speaking of, but self can only relate it to myself. Well, of course, it's not personal. This aloneness is all there is. And without any others, of course, there's no possibility of connection, not between you and me.
You said yesterday, or maybe Friday, about like falling without no arms and without no chance to get a grip.
Mm-hmm.
Is that falling into aloneness?
Yeah, well, in the story, it felt like falling into nothing, which is the same, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's actually worse than aloneness or oneness, because that's the other way of looking at the aloneness. There's oneness, which sounds, again, of course, that was really attractive to me. I wanted to be at one, but there's no one to be at one, so you don't get that. That would be for you, wouldn't it? That's not going to happen. That's the whole illusion of separation, is that. The fantasy that I am a part and I could become at one with whatever, and there's no limit to what that whatever might be. What might be imagined to be whole. Well, you can imagine what wholeness is, but wholeness isn't. This aloneness is empty. And so there's nothing to be at one with. That's why it's complete. There's no other than. And although that may feel dreadful in the seeming loss of the possibility, because we are talking about the loss of all possibilities, this isn't a possibility. It is already all and nothing. Even nothing isn't a possibility. And that can sound so utterly nihilistic and negative, and yet, of course, it's total peace. This is totally at peace, regardless of atrocities or whatever else. What is imagined or you've heard, and so there's a story and there's thoughts about. That's utterly at peace as well. It's the exact opposite of everything that I thought was true. That hope was good. That possibility is good. That dreams are good. They're all positive. They're all in my favor. They're all good for me. They're fucking not. They are not. They are constantly, consciously or unconsciously, they are making the only, all that is somehow wrong, not complete. Possibility is incompletion. And although in possibility we're so indoctrinated and conditioned to believe that possibilities is where life lies, all the, the infinite possibilities. No, infinite is no possibilities. There's no possibility. Possibility only refers to an imagined future. That's all it is, that simple. And possibilities are just thoughts about possibilities. And there's nothing wrong with, there'll still be thoughts of possibilities, but they mean shit. Nothing. And so I used to hear quite often someone would say, speakers I'd go to listen to would say, anything is possible. I'm going, oh, really? And I didn't, it can say, sounds a bit smug, but I didn't really understand why it never sat right. It didn't, really, anything is possible? It's not accurate at all. There isn't anything that's possible. All possibilities are impossible. That's the liberation. This isn't a possibility, and this is all. And it's just full stop. There's nothing, and this. It sounds so dreadful that to talk about no possibilities, but it's not at all dreadful. Quite the contrary. For some, that doesn't appease self. I'm not happy with that because this isn't how it should be. Then, of course, possibility is absolutely essential. I can't live without possibility, without hope, without the future. Maybe it can just be obvious that the future was always just an idea, is always nothing more than an idea. That's all. And so the future remains as ideas about what might be, what could be, plans, and just happen naturally. But investment in them, and you know how invested self is, you have been in the potential. There is no potential. This is no potential. There is no potentiality here. It's wonderful. I mean, you wanted it all, but you didn't. It's not true. You didn't. This is all. You don't want it. That's it. But here it is anyway. You didn't ask for this, did you? You didn't ask to be bored here on a Sunday afternoon. But here it is. You didn't ask to, go to all the trouble of getting to Copenhagen to have 3 days of a complete and utter waste of time. What am I doing? I could have been doing something useful. But here it is. It might appear that the hamster wheel still turns. It might still appear that way. But the hamster's dead. He's lying there like that next to him. But because it might still feel like the wheel is turning. In that way, so it might feel, or not, and it might feel sometimes and not others, that this is the flow, the river, so it's moving. So life might have a sense of movement about it. And then at other times it will be the depths of the ocean that's completely unmoving. But river, ocean, all the same. So this is all the same, appearing different. And I guess the search has been, the spiritual search, this is my interpretation of it, has always been to search for that which doesn't change, the unchanging. To find the unchanging. I don't know if that was for you, but I get the sense of a lot of spirituality is about that. What is it that is unchanging? And it goes by many names. And do you think the unchanging is interested in the names that you might prefer? It becomes very laughable, all of it. So, like any human being ever knew the unchanging, fuck off. There will be no doubt that there is no one that ever knew more than you. I mean, there is an arrogance about this. Not an arrogance in the way that self would talk about arrogance, but there is no doubt that you won't want to ask anyone about the absolute ever again. If the absolute is completely unknowable, doubtlessly. Don't ask me how it's doubtless. You won't know that if it's doubtless. But if there is no doubt that no one knows, that's the end of the search, because you won't want to ask anyone ever again, and you won't come to any more meetings. I'm consoling myself with that's why my audience is decreasing. Because I'm such a wonderful speaker. That's the success, is that no one comes. So I just say, this doesn't change. It just appears to change. And that seems fine. Why that's okay, and why that seems to be okay, I don't know. It's like, it's no answer. So that's what I've got. That's what I've got for you lot. This is always the same, always appearing different. Big deal. And it's not a big deal. I mean, that's funny. We're talking about everything. We're talking about the biggest deal there could possibly be. There is no other possibility. So, and it's incredibly ordinary. Wow, who expected that? And who expected ordinary to be wonderful? Oh, you didn't expect that. You expected wonderful to be extraordinary. The wonder is how ordinary, the mundane, the most mundane. So you're no longer looking for the extraordinary or the magical, if everything is magical and extraordinary in its ordinariness. Really nothing is more magical or extraordinary than anything else. Talking about the unchanging makes it sound like something. It's not something. I could call it nothing, but that sounds like something, doesn't it? If you try and imagine nothing, you have to make it something. Otherwise you can't. It can't be. For something to be, it has to be conceptualized, it has to be something. So nothing is something. Try and imagine something being nothing. Good luck. So the experience, life is still all the somethings. What you might call duality is exactly the same. And yet it's undeniably empty or nothing. It's not nothing being something. It's that something is nothing. Nothing is something. Which I guess that's the difference between speaking about it in this way and how a lot of non-duality is, which makes nothing, or another word for the spaciousness, the emptiness, into something, and that is the source of everything. The unchanging source from which everything springs. Well, it's just more illusion. It's like pandering. It's a complete pandering to me who needs to have an explanation. Because that is enough for me to hold on to. I will hold on to that because now I really know the true source. I know God. And it feels, oh, thank God there is something. It's unchanging in this mad fucking chaos that I have no control over. Then there's the relief of, I know the truth.
Everything is just unknown.
Well, I don't know why I'm very happy to tell you that I don't know, but I haven't got the faintest clue about anything that I'm talking to you about at all. The words, and it is the same for you. If I mean, occasionally you might even sense it experientially. Where the fuck did these words come from? You know, if you really do speak before you think, you know, your mother always said, you really need to think before you speak when you say something inappropriate, which I was very good at. So I think I'm at an advantage because as a child, that is just naturally how I've always been, speaking before I think. So I never really, maybe less than some selves, had the sense that I was in control of what the fuck came out of my mouth. But I think everyone I speak to, occasionally they get the really felt sense of, I have no idea where the words come from. Now, self can be sort of okay with that, but if it gets to where did the thoughts come from, because self really needs to be some kind of manager of thought. Now, if you're very honest, thoughts, you have absolutely, no one has any idea about a source of thoughts, or even the location of thoughts. I mean, the whole notion that thoughts are located in your head is such bullshit, isn't it? They're not, are they? Thoughts do not have a location. Do they? Seeing does not have a location. I mean, I really mean this. I know it's...
Where did that come from?
I mean, I only know that the eyes are seeing because I've been told that the eyes are seeing. That's not how seeing is. Not at all. Really, there isn't any seeing at all. Because seeing only relies completely on the seer. The whole thought concept of seeing relies on there being a seer to do the seeing. Otherwise, seeing is not happening. Funny. So a lot of what we say we know is simply not true. And I mean in the very basis level that everyone would agree on, or the whole of humanity pretty much would agree on, is simply not true. Because all of it relies on a location from which everything is happening from, the subject. So,
I'm very happy that you're doing your best to put words on this. It means a lot to me.
oh, thanks. I do my best. Sometimes it feels good. Sometimes it feels really pathetic. I guess the compassion, why I go to the trouble to do this, apart from my burgeoning, massive ego, apart from that, the reason I come and do this is compassionate, that, believe it or not knowing is simply wonderful. Not wonderful in a way that the one who wants to know would ever imagine it to be. Just a simple wonder of not knowing. Of course, wonder means not knowing. The reason life isn't wonderful is because you say you know everything. You know what things are, you know how they work, you know how everything is interrelated, you know what happened yesterday, you know what's happening now, you probably think you know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, no wonder life's mundane, because knowledge it kills, it's dead. Knowledge is not alive, because knowledge is false. Real is unknowable. And that's everything. No exception. You know nothing. There's no you to know anything. And all knowledge is simply the one who thinks they know, saying they know what they think they know. And going round to ask all the other fucking know-alls, do you know more than me? Please tell me, so that I might be as wonderful as wonderfully dead as you are. Not dead, but it's because there's nothing. I don't want to make knowledge as though it's a negative. It's just empty. It's just not what it. It's just not what self says it is. It's just not. And then knowledge is liberated, and understanding is liberated to be a playful play with it. Doesn't mean anything, because knowledge is so important to me. It's what I rely on. Otherwise, I'm so unsafe. Well, there is no security. There is no safety. But then, of course, you're the only one who relied on that. So if it all disappears, if all safety evaporates, there's no possibility of safety, then none is required. You're the one who needs it. Life doesn't need anything.